Hi guys, we'll just give it a couple more minutes in case anyone else is joining, and then we'll get going. Okie dokie. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining this Monday evening. My name's Holly. I'm now a Foundation Year 2 doctor working at Aintree Hospital, and I'm the co-president of Thursday 15. So who are for Thursday 15? First of all, just a quick promo. We are a committee of Northwest junior doctors that have been primarily running a preparation for finals and preparation for PSA series over the past year. You can find us on Facebook, and you can also find us on Instagram. So today I'm running session 1 of the Specialised Foundation Programme preparation series. It's the first in a 2-part lecture series, hopefully to sort of help you understand the process of applying to the SFP. And what exactly the SFP is. I should have activated the chat and the Q&A. So if you've got any questions at all, unmute or put something in the chat or put it in the Q&A. I'm also being joined by a couple of fellow junior doctors who are also SFP doctors to answer all of your questions later on in the session as well. So today we're just going to discuss what the Specialised Foundation Programme is, the application process to the SFP, and some tips about white space questions, and then we'll finish off with a Q&A. You'll be able to access the slides and a recording of this session if there's any bits that you've missed or you want to re-go over. And you'll be able to do that by filling in the feedback form at the end of the slides, and we'll send out an email with the slides and the recording after you've filled that in about a week or so. So as I said, my name's Holly. I'm currently in F2. I'm doing the Education Specialised Foundation Programme at Aintree Hospital. So I should also say as well, anything that we're talking about in this session is just from our personal experience. Can't guarantee that just because I say something, it means you're going to do well in your application or that you're going to get a place. It's just my personal opinion, and I've been successful in getting an SFP place. So hopefully the tips help. So the SFP is the Specialised Foundation Programme. You may have heard it being called the Academic Foundation Programme or the AFP. It can be in one of three stems, really. So it either has a research component, an educational component, or a leadership and management component. I think from my experience, most people who had heard of the SFP when I was applying primarily thought it was for research, but actually it spans a lot of other things, and particularly with the education and the leadership and management components, there's opportunities to get extra qualifications such as a postgraduate certificate. The structure of the Specialised Foundation Programme varies. Either you have a 4-month block in F2 where it's non-clinical, so you're not rotating around the hospital or around GP like the rest of your colleagues. You spend 4 months solely doing academic activity, whether that is research, teaching, or undertaking leadership activities. But Johnny, who's hopefully going to be joining us later, I know that his component is, I think it works out as a day a week or a day every other week of academic time. There's pros and cons of both. And usually the format of the SFP that you are applying to will be very clearly laid out in sort of the deanery's handbook of detailing all of the SFP placements that they have on offer. As I said, there's opportunities for a postgraduate certificate, depending on who you apply with. And again, that should be made very clear on the advertising on the deanery websites. And other pros of doing the SFP, I would say, is there's opportunities for publications, presentations, and general networking. What I've found is that the group of doctors in the Northwest who are undertaking an SFP, we're all quite keen. We all have different research or educational interests, and it's a great opportunity to come together and find people with similar interests to yourself and get projects underway. So looking at the timeline, I've had a look at the application process for this year. So we're currently at the session 1 marker, and I said we'd be running a second session that will focus primarily on interviews and how to go about preparing for interviews. That will be early October. So the SFP application window is between the 7th and the 21st of September. And I believe that's the same window as the normal foundation programme, but you have to come up with all of these white space questions. It's not quite the same sort of arbitrary filling in your personal details application that the foundation programme application is. The SFP application is quite a lot more thorough and does require a little bit more preparation. Then from the 22nd of September to the 30th of December, the deaneries will send out interview invites. Usually, in my experience, it's from October onwards that the interviews take place. And then from the 11th of January, you've got your round 1 offers. So offers for the SFP are delivered in cascades. So you may be fortunate and get a offer within the first cascade of offers, and you'll have 48 hours to accept or decline that offer. Then after 7 days, I believe, then the next cascade opens and they reoffer more places depending on who's accepted and who's rejected. And I think it goes to sort of 3 cascades. So if you're not successful on the first cascade, don't worry, you might still get an offer on the second or even third cascade. The benefit of, as you might have realised, of applying to the SFP is that because the cascades start at the 11th of January, you will find out if you've got an offer and where that offer is far earlier than any of your colleagues who are applying to the normal foundation programme. So, as I mentioned before, the application process is slightly more arduous than the normal foundation programme application. consists of some white space questions. So they are, when I applied, they were a maximum 200 words, and there were up to 8 questions that you had to fill in and show off all of your achievements and why you would be a great candidate to undertake the SFP. Each foundation school looks at different white space questions, so you don't necessarily have to answer all 8 if you're not intending to apply to foundation schools that don't, say neither of the foundation schools that you're applying to look at question 7, you don't have to fill that in, you can leave that blank. So just make sure that you look at what the different deaneries are asking you to fill in, and again they should lay this out quite clearly on their websites. I should mention that your first point of call for all information about the SFPs that are on offer, you can go on the UK FPO website. That should give you sort of overarching information about the application process and deadlines and things like that. But look at the foundation school websites to get a breakdown of all of the SFP placements. So they often have big PDFs where they'll say, you know, this research SFP at Hull York in oncology consists of this. And what you're looking for really, for if you're doing research, might be whether you're expected to find your own project, whether that you're just completing a project that someone else is essentially giving to you. If you're looking at education, I'd advise to look at what sort of teaching are you expected to get involved in, or are they calling it education but actually it's a research project within the education department and there's actually no teaching? And is there opportunities for any further qualifications or training during that SFP block as well? So I just went on a tangent. So about the white space questions, you don't have to answer them all, but that should be detailed on the deanery's website. And then what they will also detail on the deanery website is how they're going to allocate your points and how they're going to long list you. So you will apply with your white space questions and you'll submit a list of extracurricular achievements alongside these. So these might be publications, presentations, things like that. And they will then mark you on your white space questions on your extracurricular activities and give you a point and tell you whether you've been successful to then make it to interview. You'll then undertake an interview and they'll combine your marks from the interview potentially with the applications, although some deaneries kind of wipe your slate clean once you've got to interview and then go purely based on your interview. So it's definitely worth just checking out how everything is marked, long listed and then shortlisted from there. So I've put a little link when you get the slides. There's a link to the UK FPO website that just summarises how the different deaneries are marking and which white space questions the different deaneries are looking at. I would advise that in terms of which white space questions the deaneries are looking at and how the different deaneries mark their applications, I would really regularly check the website, because I found that the Northwest Deanery actually changed a couple of times prior to the window of application opening, and then it also changed halfway through the window opening as well, which isn't great for stress levels, but obviously you don't want to be caught out by that. So definitely just double check before you submit your application. Check on the deanery websites what they're looking at and make sure you've absolutely filled in all of the white space questions that they're asking you to look at. I was a bit scared when I did my application, so I filled in all of the white space questions, even though I knew that I just didn't want to get caught out by a last minute change that I might have missed. Obviously, I'm not advising that you do any more work than necessary. Filling in and preparing these white space questions is work enough. But that was a way I found made me feel slightly less stressed. So then you fill in your white space questions, you fill out your extra educational achievements, and then you may get listed for interviews. And then after interviews, you may receive an offer. And as I said, it's in multiple cascades. And the SFP cascades are prior to the Foundation Priority Programme offers as well. So they're places within the UK that are historically underfilled. So they are normal foundation programme places, they're not SFP places, but they may offer an additional incentive, for example, cheaper accommodation, or they may offer a PG cert as part of it. So I would recommend also looking through the Foundation Priority Programme places and just seeing if any offer any extra research or educational or leadership opportunities alongside it without officially being an SFP. So the SFP offers come out, then the Foundation Priority Programme offers come out, and then it's the normal foundation programme offers. So it can be quite a tense time of the year, depending on when your medical school finals are. I know that my colleagues were getting their foundation programme offers on the day of our final year OSCE, and when, especially those that were unsuccessful in getting where they wanted to go, that was really quite stressful for them. So I definitely appreciated knowing months prior to my colleagues where I was going and being able to plan a little bit more in advance. One piece of advice that I would give, whether you are thinking of research, education, or leadership, or you don't know which one you want to apply for, I would, in preparation for the white space questions and for your interviews especially, I would think up a project that you might want to do, even if it's just something so that if they were to ask you, have you got an idea of what project you'd like to do? Or if it's something that you could put a line in your applications about, it shows that there's a reason, there's a bit of research that you're really interested in and you're really keen to further. If you're really dead set on a very specific project and that's why you want to do an SFP, it's to do that project, I would contact a relevant supervisor that's listed on the website as being an SFP supervisor, or finding someone within the hospital that the SFP is offered within, if that makes sense. Contact that person in advance just to see if your project sounds feasible. That's then a great thing to be putting, particularly in your interviews, to be honest, showing that you've thought about it, you've been proactive. It won't necessarily make you any more likely to get a project because you get to know the supervisor, but it's good in terms of brownie points to show that you're proactive. So as I'm currently based in the Northwest, rather than going through every foundation school and deanery within the UK, I thought I'd talk specifically about the Northwest this evening, but the same things are applicable. I've just gone through the Northwest applicant document and just picked out key points. So in order to apply for the SFP, you must have a minimum EPM decile score of 44 points. So hopefully you guys know what your EPM is by now and know whether you'd be eligible for that or not. So this extract, in the Northwest of England, we will shortlist an interview based on overall suitability and score for an SFP programme. We will not run separate shortlisting and interview process for each individual SFP pathway. So that's a really key thing to bear in mind. For example, if you are thinking of applying for a research pathway, but all of your education is all of your experiences within education, you've done educational projects, you've got great feedback on your teaching, you've set up a peer mentoring scheme within your medical school, then that will still count as great experience. They're not judging you just because you're applying to a research programme based on your research experience. They're viewing everything as a whole. So ideally, you want to show that you've got a little bit of research, a little bit of education, a little bit of leadership. But if all of your experience is within one domain, just because you're applying for a different domain, I would still say absolutely milk all that experience that you've got, talk about it as much as you can, and obviously reflect on what you've learned and what you've gained from those experiences. It's also worth bearing in mind, if you're looking at the education and leadership pathways, that probably means that there's going to be a research element within the interview or within the white space questions that you're asking about. So you do need to You can't just rely on the experience that you've had in that one field, if that makes sense. So in terms of the questions that the North West are looking at this year, they're looking at the questions pertaining to career goals and team working questions. They are allocating points that you've got for any posters, presentations, and publications, but they're not allocating points for intercalation or any prizes that you've won. I think that's potentially in an effort to sort of widen participation, and they recognise that maybe fewer people are intercalating now that the rules about how the foundation programme places are allocated, so they don't want to disadvantage anyone who hasn't intercalated. So looking at how they allocate their points, they're giving you 10 points for each white space question, so that you only have to fill in 2 out of the 8 white space questions for the Northwest, so that's quite good. And then there's 5 points available for any previous oral presentations, so these are achievements you've already got in the bank. There's 4 points available for any previous poster presentations and 5 points for any previous publications, but only the highest achievement is scored. So even if you've got 10 publications, that's great, absolutely talk about it within your white space questions and within the interview, but only your best one, i.e. your first author in a peer-reviewed journal, only that one is going to count. I should also say as well, I would absolutely not be discouraged if you don't have presentations, publications. I really wouldn't be put off applying to the SFP. As you can see, the white space questions individually are worth way more than the presentations or the publications individually. If you've got loads of experience to talk about, you're really keen, you've shown interest, I think the only thing that you lose from applying is the time and the effort that you've actually put into the application. And I would strongly encourage anyone to apply to the SFP. So in terms of how you're going to prepare for your white space questions, what I did, and so as I said, I can only talk from previous experience, is I made a list of all of my achievements throughout medical school that I know I wanted to show off about, essentially. And then I made a separate list of all of your kind of buzzwords that you want to show. So as I said, you want to show a bit of research, a bit of education, and a bit of leadership. But you also want to show teamwork, motivation, organisation, time management, all of the classic things that you probably talked about in your personal statement when you initially applied for medical school. And one thing to bear in mind, it may say within the supporting documentation on the deanery websites, but the questions may be judged individually or together by the same assessor, i.e., are they being judged by 2 separate people who won't necessarily see the other question that you put in, or is the same person reading both questions? That's important to try and find out, because if the same person is reading both, you can spread your experience over 2 questions and talk in more detail. But if one person is looking at one and another person is looking at the other question, you'd obviously want to talk about your best and biggest achievements in both. And obviously, as you will have done in previous applications, reflect on the utility of these experiences and then lead that on to how you want to develop the skills further and how the SFP will enable you to do that in a way that the normal foundation programme wouldn't. So looking at the 2 questions that the Northwest are specifically marking, this is the first one, which is about career goals. So what are your specific reasons for applying for a special experience programme? That's the SFP. I don't know if it's even changed names since I applied. Please highlight how the programme will contribute to your clinical or research career plans and briefly outline these. So the way I would break this down is obviously it's in 2 parts. So why do you want to do the SFP? And then they're very helpfully said, please link this to your overall aims within a medical or research career. So this is where if you've got an idea of a project that you'd like to further, you could put this in. And that would then allow you to say, you know, I've previously worked on this, which I enjoyed because it developed my data analysis skills. I enjoyed working in a team. I led this part of that research project. I'd like to further that during my SFP block, where I know I will get where I will get 4 months of protected time in order to further this research. And then in the future, I would like a portfolio career consisting of research alongside my personal interest of emergency medicine or whichever. So that allows you to talk about previous things you've achieved and the skills that you've gained, and showing that you've reflected on that experience. You probably also want to mention something specific to the programme you're applying to. This is a difficult art. If you're applying to, and I should say, I believe you're only allowed to apply to a maximum of 2 foundation schools for the SFP. And if they happen to be marking the same white space question, so if you're applying to 2 programmes that are judging this question, trying to tailor your white space question answer to one specific programme may be difficult, but do try and do that if you can. So if you know that they both offer 4 months of protected time for research, for example, say you know that by applying to this programme, you will get this 4 months time, which will allow you to fully embed yourself within the research. If it offers extra qualifications, make sure that you say that. You want to show that you understand what you're getting yourself into. And I don't think it's a bad thing to say that, you know, it's an extra challenge. You're adding extra responsibility. Yes, you get this 4 month block, but you are undertaking additional academic activities, whilst also being expected to complete the same clinical portfolio in 4 months less time compared to normal foundation programme applicants. So you need to show, yes, this may be a challenge, but I've learned from this previous experience through X, Y, Z. And then I would also say it would be wise to mention sort of future academic plans. Understand that by entering onto the SFP, you've sort of got a foot in the ladder up the academic medicine pathway. And if you don't know what an academic clinical fellow is, or you don't know if you want to do a PhD, I would recommend just having a look, just type in sort of academic medicine pathway, ACF, SFP, and there's a sort of diagram that shows at which points you can sort of either step out of training and complete extra academic activities, or for example, with an ACF, that's where you can do academic activities alongside still being in a training post. I think it's quite good to be able to show that you've thought about this, even if you don't really intend to apply to an ACF or a PhD later down the line. At least show you've thought about it. You know that this is the first step on the ladder. And then I would also tie it in with your future clinical plans. Is the project that you are hoping to do or have previously done linked to your speciality that you're interested in, or do you not know what speciality you want to do? And that's absolutely fine. But you can also tie that in and say, I want to explore further a variety of different specialities by undertaking research. So hopefully that little bit of advice helps. That's how I would go about structuring it. Obviously, you'll find your own way. And if you make those lists of sort of qualities and achievements and sort of plug them in, hopefully you can see that you would be able to sort of use previous achievements to demonstrate the qualities and tie that in to why an SFP would be good to develop that. So the second question is about teamwork, and it says academic medicine requires an individual to work successfully in a team. Describe a time that is relevant to your foundation training when you worked as a successful member of a team, and identify your role and contribution to this success. Explain the significance of this experience to your application. So this question, you want to ideally show teamwork and some element of leadership. You want to show that you can work within a team, but also maybe give an example of when you stepped into a leadership role, but show that you're not only a leader, you're happy to work within a team. You've got great communication skills, great interpersonal skills, but also you know how to delegate, and you've stepped up to the plate to control one specific element, and that went well because for whatever reason. So as I said, yeah, delegation, communication, interpersonal skills, they're all really relevant here. Organisation, and maybe if you've had to talk to senior members of faculty, or you've been acting as sort of a middleman, communicating between students, members of faculty, things like that. The important thing to note about this is this example does not have to be medically related. If you've got a brilliant example of teamwork where you've managed to problem solve, acted as a leader whilst also being a good team member, that's fantastic. It can be medically related, but there are also positives of having something like maybe you're on a medical committee. That's not necessarily clinical, but it could be to do with medicine, or sport, or another committee. Shows that you're well-rounded, and there's more to life than medicine, as long as you can show that it is relevant to your foundation training. So was it high pressure? Was it stressful? Did you have to work within a multidisciplinary team? Were there high stakes involved? It doesn't have to cover all of these, but you need to find a sort of way that you can link it in and show that it's relevant. That also, in this question, is an opportunity for you to show that you understand what the foundation programme will be like, and you can show that it's stressful, and that doing an SFP may entail you doing extra activities, thus making it maybe slightly more stressful, but you know how to deal with it because in this teamwork situation you had great time management and delegation skills. Yeah, that last bullet point is what I've just said. Great. And that's basically just a whistle-stop tour of all of the white space questions and application bits of advice that I had to give. I don't know if anybody has any... Oh, sorry, I could just see Johnny's here, so I'm just going to promote him to a panelist. If anyone had any questions, I'm just going to introduce, we've got two other foundation doctors with us tonight. So Katie, I don't know if you just want to introduce yourself and talk about the track you're on.
Yeah, sure. I couldn't start video, so I'll just chat with the video off. Yeah, I'm Katie. I am an SFP doctor at Aintree with Holly, but I'm less than full time, so I just do 4 days a week, well, 80% of full time. So I do, I'll be in F1 until November, but I'll also do my academic block like Holly in my F2 year, which will be in April. And I'm on the research track. So I'm sort of hoping to pursue a PhD either after F2 or a little bit later down the line. Yeah, that's me. Great.
And we've also got Johnny. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
So my name's Jonathan. I'm one of the I'm a leadership SFP. I'm at East Lancs, so Blackburn and Burnley. I sort of chose my track sort of unusually, so I think leadership is a bit of an unusual one, and that not many people sort of aspire to be in sort of leadership positions. They sort of collect them as they sort of head towards consultancy. So I think it's a relatively new track, so I'm just sort of feeling my way through it.
Great. So between the three of us, we cover all of the 3 tracks that there are in the SFP. So if you've got any questions about research or leadership, I've brought the guys on board just so that they can answer questions specifically about that. Happy for questions about anything, whether it's ranging from applications or what life is like during the SFP. Yeah, just fire away. I can see that we've already had a question about EPM decile scoring. Has it been scrapped for SFP now, like the standard foundation programme applications? So when that copy and pasted bit that I put on the slide, that was when I looked through the Northwest application handbook. It said a minimal score of 44 that you needed to be able to apply, but it didn't actually say that they were then using your EPM as part of the scoring, although I would just check that. So I don't believe it's fully been scrapped. Like it's being used to shortlist, but it's not necessarily being included in the points that are being allocated. but that's only for the Northwest. I would check specifically for the deaneries you're looking to apply for. So question for you both. Do you think it's worth applying to the SFP if you feel you've not particularly stood out at med school and don't have many achievements aside from making it through? Making it through is absolutely an achievement, by the way. It's a rough ride. But yeah, what would you guys say? Is it still worth applying to the SFP even if you don't feel you've stood out at medical school?
I think definitely. I mean, you don't lose anything by applying other than your time in putting the application together. If it's something that interests you and you want a bit of extra time to pursue your own interests, I think like you've got nothing to lose by applying. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I'd definitely add to that. I'd say my EPM wasn't particularly fantastic. I was 7th decile, and I'm still here. And I think you lose, as Katie said, you lose absolutely nothing from having a punt, because the whole application is free, it doesn't bias your other ones, and you get a yes or no before you start picking jobs for a regular application. So literally everyone I talked to when I was looking at applying, I think I decided to apply for my SFP a week before the deadline. And it was literally off the back of a conversation with an F1 at the time who was on one, who was like, mate, just have a punt, like you never know. And if nothing else, it's another chance to get an area or a hospital or a track that you like the look of.
Yeah, absolutely. Most people won't really consider an SFP because they don't really know what it is. And I think that's a really good point at the end there from Johnny. It's if you're set on going to one particular hospital, it gives you another extra shot at getting into that hospital, if you have a particular preference. So who is good to ask to read over your white space questions? Who did you guys get to read over your white space questions? Did you get anyone to read them over?
I had like a mentor that I was working with who was like a consultant in medical school. I got him to read them over, and then I just got some like non-medical people, like friends, to read them over just to see if they like made sense and like flowed well. Can't think of anyone else.
I think I got so at the time of application around September, I was placed on surgery, and again it was off the conversation of that F1. I got him to look at it because I was having a chat with him and he absolutely smashed his, and I thought that's a person who's obviously knows what they're talking about. So I think you can either go to sort of like down Katie's route and get them to be read over by somebody who's going to be in a position where they look at applications for medical specialties and all that. So the consultants, or you can get somebody who's done it recently and scored well. Is good, and then just build on what Holly said a little bit earlier. For the questions regarding leadership and teamwork, the answers I gave were absolutely nothing to do with medicine whatsoever. And again, I'm here, so they can be a bit off the field because, at risk of sounding a bit patronizing, as medical students, there's not a lot of times. Hopefully, there's not a lot of times when you're in a real stressful leadership position as a student, because yeah, it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah. I was applying alongside my flatmate, and we both looked over each other's and kind of had a session of working on how we could develop our applications. I tried to find sort of SFP doctors that were at the hospital that I was based at and got one of them to read over, and then just any mentors at medical school. I would say pretty much anyone who's happy to look over it. Obviously, everyone's going to have their own opinion. There's always going to be something that you can improve on. But I think it's useful to get anyone's eyes on it, really. Is there a way to find out the average score of SFP applicants from previous years, just to judge whether we might stand a chance with our combined white space questions and educational achievements? I looked really hard for this in the year I applied. I couldn't find any. And the scoring changes year on year. So I don't know if that necessarily would be a good guide. What do you guys think?
I'd kind of be tempted to ignore it completely. You don't know what you're going to score. You don't know what your well, I think you can work out what your EPM is. You have no idea how your white space questions are going to score. Like, it's just going to spook you into not putting an application in when that application might be successful. So I think it's borderline irrelevant.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think for us, the Northwest literally changed their their scoring requirements quite late in the day. So what you might be reading now might not be relevant anyway. So I think just focus on putting together a good application that represents you really well, if you're interested, and then rather than kind of get bogged down with like various algorithms and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. With regards to picking research projects, have you ever heard of someone having a supervisor outside of the deanery or even the country? Would I definitely need to involve someone from the deanery or affiliated uni? I don't 100% know about this. I've personally not heard of anyone who's got a supervisor not within the deanery.
I can maybe shed a bit of light on this. I've got a supervisor. So when you become an F1, you have a clinical supervisor who's your supervisor for your particular placement, and an educational supervisor who's your supervisor for your whole F1. SFPs also have an academic supervisor who supervises the SFP part, and they will be someone within your trust. This all being said, I'm currently engaged in a research for the research group in Birmingham, so it's not even the same deanery, and that's not been a problem at all. You just need to have a bit of nous and just sort of make it happen.
Yeah, the whole thing about the SFP is after your 2 years, you're supposed to present whatever project you've done during your SFP block at a regional or national meeting with all the other SFP doctors. One thing that I was told is if you can just prove that you've done something that should have taken that amount of time during the block that fits the guidelines that your trust give you, that's great. If what you actually spend your time on is doing something a bit more like what Johnny's doing, that's also fine if you manage to make the time for it. I think it is just what Johnny's saying, having a bit of nous and playing it to your advantage. Johnny, just a couple of questions for you. Is it only Blackburn in the Northwest that offers a leadership SFP? And could you talk a bit more about the leadership programme and what it's like?
Yeah, so I think the leadership ones, like I said, I think they're new, and I don't think there's too many of them around. But it's, from what I recall, it's definitely not Blackburn only that was offering them when I applied. This all being said, it's all quite fluid. They change foundation tracks and programs quite a lot, so it might be different now. But what it involves is, so I mentioned having an academic supervisor. So my academic supervisor is he's one of the chief medical directors of the trust. And the projects they sort of offer me are more sort of leadership orientated. So I think this year I've been offered a project on, we've recently changed to a new computer software, and it's really screwed over how our hospital discharges patients, and GPs are sort of being left with sort of scraps of information. So I'm being put on a panel to try and work out how we can fix this. So that's one thing. And I think last year it was looking at how we can get F1s more prepared and feeling more supported out of hours dealing with emergencies. I think the HEE also funds me for a module of leadership skills. And I sit in, or can sit in, on various meetings that are high up within the trust, sort of like steering meetings between all the medical directors and between the very senior leadership teams, sort of like a fly on the wall, which is quite interesting. A lot of this stuff, I imagine, will heavily vary depending on your trust, because my supervisor is very, very good. So it can look different. I've also found that I tend to get volunteered or sort of first dibs for various things. So I'm one of the trust representatives regionally for the foundation group through the Northwest Foundation Forum. And that's sort of, I was still elected to it by my cohort, but it fell a lot more naturally to me because of my position. I was sort of told to go for it by people. And that's led to other opportunities as well. So it's more unusual. It doesn't restrict me in that I do like to do research, and I am still doing research that is completely irrelevant to leadership. So yeah, it's more unusual. It's different opportunities. It's quite interesting.
Great. There's been a couple of questions about med-ed pathways as well, so I'll just answer a bit about that. one of them was, how would you know what potential projects you could do as an SFP to mention in the interview? I would say that probably also actually applies to all of them. So how would you know what to mention in the interview if you're not in the current area you want to apply to? So if you look at the documents online, it will often say, mindset, opportunity to teach and teach within the simulation centre and engage with educational projects. You could then email the person who's in charge of the simulation centre and say, hey, I'm looking to apply. What sort of things do you have going on? What sort of research could I engage in? And get project ideas that way. Or alternatively, if you know you want to do a certain project, you could email and say, I'm looking to do this project. Would that be okay? Katie, how did you sort of go about finding out about your project, or did you engage with any supervisors beforehand?
So when I was applying and doing my interviews, I had like different ideas compared with what I've actually ended up doing. So I was a graduate medic and I had a bit of a career before in digital. So I thought I was going to do something digital related, and there's quite a big digital health industry in Liverpool. So I kind of use that in my interviews as that's why I want to go to Liverpool, because it's going to really support my project ideas. But actually what I've ended up doing, so a couple of different things. We have like regional teaching days, and in those teaching days, you often come away with like different ideas and through like networking and stuff. And I've ended up doing more of like a medical education related project with Holly, and we're looking at increasing access to academic careers for like low income people, and also like, improving diversity in academic careers. So something that I wasn't even thinking about necessarily pursuing whilst I was applying, just through networking and chatting to people. I kind of developed an interest like during F1. So even though you might kind of put yourself forward as someone that's really interested in something during the interview, you're not necessarily like pinned down or tied down in doing that one thing. I think I put myself forward as, this person interested in digital health, and that probably got me my job potentially, because I think I put myself forward quite well, but I've not done that at all, and I don't think that's going to be a problem or will be a problem.
And another question about MedEd. If you talk to a supervisor before, is that for a potential project for SFP or something that you've done in the past? So it might be if you've been working with a supervisor on a project at medical school and you want to continue that forward, I would absolutely send them an email and say you're intending on applying to the SFP in education in that area. You've seen there's the opportunity to engage with some research activity as part of that. Would they be willing to supervise you or help you with that project along the way? That would be great. But equally, I wouldn't feel shy about contacting people who you've never met in real life, who you've not bumped into on the wards, or who you're not in the same region as. People who are involved in these sort of SFP activities and who are supervisors are usually really keen to have more interested people on board, and will be more than happy to hear from you and hear your interest in their projects. So I would absolutely contact about new projects or about continuing old projects as well. A question about paid interview prep courses. So what are our thoughts? If you don't think it's necessary, what is there out there to help us prep, and what are they like? I may be a little bit biased in this, but I don't believe you should have to pay to prepare for these sorts of things, but I can understand wanting to pay to feel like you'll be more prepared. I know, obviously we're doing a talk in October that will be a sort of vague interview preparation talk, but I know that MMR-SOC at the University of Manchester, MMR-SOC, or the Manchester Medical Research Society, something like that, they did when I applied, quite a good SFP preparation course that went into stats and critiquing a paper really well. There's quite a lot of SFP mentorship schemes around. What did you guys have any paid interview prep courses, or what did you do to prepare for your SFP interviews?
I didn't do any paid courses, but me and one of my friends who was applying as well, we were both more worried about like the clinical station. So that's where like you're presented with a clinical case and you have to talk through how you would manage that patient. And it's basically just to assess that you're going to be a safe doctor. So what we did to prepare for that was we just prepared loads of cases for each other. And by preparing the cases, it was really good practice, but also doing the cases that the other person had prepared for you was also really useful. I don't think for Northwest we had like an abstract to assess or anything, did we? It was just clinical and
No, I
your
think
sort
it
of
was
personal.
clinical and or portfolio station. So I also applied to London, which had the paper station. So that was the prep course that I was on about was really useful for that. But obviously, if you're looking for the Northwest, it's just clinical and then talking about yourself and your aspirations, I think.
So I was in a bit of a, what I would definitely advise is look at, for the foundation school, the schools you're applying to, look at all the information they give you about what the interview is going to be like, and then prep based off of that. I personally have massive grudges against paid interview coaching courses, which I won't go into detail here. But essentially what I did was I looked at the Northwest one and they said they were going to be giving a clinical station based on an acutely unwell person. And I think then just sort of like talk about project and white space questions. The way to approach the unwell patient one was, it's an area of medicine I'm quite interested in. It's an area of medicine I've practiced quite a lot through various societies that I've been part of. And my understanding of it at the time was that you're going to be missing 4 months of your 1 year foundation, and they have to make sure that you're going to meet all the competencies as everyone else, missing 4 months of the program. So they need to make sure that you're pretty sensible going in. And the way that I would recommend doing this the most is I went into placement out of hours for the on-calls, because that's when the F1s are on call and that's when they're doing the most actual doctoring instead of being someone's scribe. And I went up to the F1s and I'd ask, like, is there anyone unwell? And I'll just follow them for a bit. If there's anyone unwell, can I just assess them? You can stand behind me and then we can just talk about it afterwards. And it's just through doing it that you just gain that confidence and practice. And I think what was also mentioned about, if you have like one of those OSCE books, of OSCE stations, you can get those, but with like acutely unwell patients in, and just practice those. And it's just have a really good A to E and you're solid. In terms of abstracts and research stations, there's 2 good books I'd recommend. One is How to Read a Paper by Trisha Greenhalgh, which is a Bible if you do any kind of research, because it looks at how to evaluate research formally. And it's really useful anyway, but it's particularly useful if you're going to have to evaluate a paper. And the next one, if you have no tolerance for serious books, is just Bad Science by Ben Goldacre, because it's just got it's evidence-based medicine in a way that's not quite so deathly boring as it is always taught. And that puts you in a really good stead to talk about any abstract they stick under your nose.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll cover this more in the session in October, but something else I would also recommend for the acutely unwell patients, the Oxford Clinical Handbook of Medicine. It's got all of the emergency scenarios right at the back. It is most likely that the person or the case that's going to be presented to you is in one of those emergency scenarios. And Geeky Medics now has some online OSCE stations, which I found really useful for finals as well. And they have emergency stations that run through what you should be looking for during the A2E. So you can even get non-medical people to test you on that, because it's very easily laid out. And final question that I can see is, can achievements like publications and posters be from prior to medical school, or do they need to be achieved during medical school? I don't know about this. What do you guys know at all?
I stuck everything I'd ever done or achieved on the form. I was very open about where it was published, how it was published, how it was presented. And then however they scored it is however they scored it. But regardless of whether it formally gets you points, it's definitely, I think so. So I did a research master's, and I think I had 1 publication output from that was quite shaky. I did 1 bit of number crunching for somebody else's paper, so I was listed as an author. But all the stuff I did that didn't manage to get published, it didn't manage to get out the door, for whatever reason, it didn't quite succeed. It was all really great to talk about, and I learned a lot from it. And I think that definitely did help. So don't, in terms of like when you're writing it on oral, just stick it on there and just be honest about it. And then if they don't score it, they don't score it. And then at interview, definitely still talk about it because it's still relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, any final questions? If not, here's a QR code for the feedback form. Any feedback would be greatly appreciated. And if you stick your email address on the feedback form, we can send you through the slides and the recording. Otherwise, thank you so much to Johnny and Katie for coming along and answering all of your questions. And thanks so much for joining us, guys.